Good evening, everyone. I'm Wendell Jones, and welcome to this edition of the platform. On this program, we examine national and international issues. The Christie administration has some big plans for foreign affairs, and once again, the Foreign Affairs Minister for the Bahamas is the Honorable Fred Mitchell, who also has the portfolio of immigration. He won the Fox Hill constituency handedly in the last general elections, and he's agreed to be our guest on the program today, and we are delighted that he is here to talk about plans for his ministry, the way ahead. Mr. Mitchell, welcome to the program.
Yeah, it's a pleasure being here. Thank you.
Guthrie, nice to have you here.
Thank you.
Did you expect to win so big in Fox Hill?
I thought it was going to be a comfortable win, but, you know, as I said, my personality is such that I wouldn't make any predictions because you never know what's going to happen. But I was pleased that people felt I served well, and I think the service is really reflected in the size of the vote.
But the boundary changed for this last election, right?
Yes. As it stands, or as it stood when the changes were made, the worst result that I got in 2007, that polling division was moved out of my constituency and put into Marathon. That's an area where Jerome Fitzgerald actually grew up, and so that was put into his constituency. And then to the south, the constituency of Fox Hill was continued to Sandlands Village Road, which took in the largest part of which is East Park Estates, which is a subdivision started by the Munnings family. I won for the first time all polling divisions, even in 2002, which had a larger margin. The margin was 1,200 or so in 2002. This time it was 877, but I didn't win all the polling divisions in 2002, but I did win all of the polling divisions in this general election. So I thought that was an indication of broad-based support.
So broad-based support on the part of the PLP in the country, you mean?
That's right, yeah. That it wasn't confined to the traditional areas because, you know, Fox Hill is essentially two types of neighborhoods. One, a neighborhood which approximates more Grantstown and Baintown, and the other which is middle class to upper middle class. But in all areas, people voted to support the PLP's candidate.
Okay.
Mr. Mitchell, what did you find as the big issues confronting your constituents?
For me, it all boiled down to crime and the economy. I mean, I think that was the same national theme. I think there are lots of sub-themes that, you know, the housing stock had deteriorated. There just seemed to be a general atmosphere in the country that people were just not sensitive to the concerns that existed in families and how the policies affected those families. You know, the children having to be taken out of school. When the rains came down during the campaign, I mean, people's houses were leaking and there was no mechanism for addressing this because many people weren't working. The power being off, the number of people who couldn't bury their dead because they didn't have money to do so. And the administration that was in office just seemed to be completely insensitive to this. And so I think that's what it is. And after the election was over, what was interesting was as you walk down the streets, even today, or stand up outside my party headquarters in Fox Hill or the constituency office, you have people passing by in their cars and they're saying, now, you all take care of us now. Take care of us, you know, or don't forget us. So it seemed to me a lot of that.
Do you think that the past 5 years, average payments obviously lost ground, right?
That's my feeling, yes. I mean, I think that I lost ground, so I can imagine, you know, people who have less than I do, how they suffered. And I mean, I went in, and some of the stories are horrendous, and of not having food to eat, going to social services and feeling that they were disrespected. And as I said, the one that always got me was not being able to bury your loved ones because you just didn't have the money, and there didn't seem to be any mechanism for addressing this.
How much of that would you say was caused by the world recession as opposed to
bad policies.
Bad policies or the maladministration of the FNF.
Well, it's clear there's a world recession. There's no question about it, and there's a contraction everywhere. The question is, how do you respond to this? We said that looking at the objective evidence in the year 07 to 08, there were certain things which the administration could have done, which could have forestalled or softened what happened post-2008. But it was clear by the fall of 2008 that we were headed into deep trouble. But there was still this rebranding exercise going on where I didn't want the project to be known as a PLP project, so I simply stopped it and I held it back. And then, of course, as time went on, Bahama being the prime example of this, I realized, good Lord, I have nothing else in the kitty, so I better revive this project and get it going. And then at every step of the way, when there were difficulties with the project, it was always the PLP's fault. The PLP was not in the government. The PLP didn't cause the investor to walk out the first time. The PLP weren't responsible for the Chinese labor element, nor the PLP responsible for finding the Chinese who financed the project and the things which came along with that. So while the recession certainly is a cause, I think it was made worse by certain decisions or omissions made by the administration prior to that recession hitting in 2008.
That's yesterday's news now.
Yes.
Today's news is what the PLP is going to do about all of this, giving hope to people, giving them job opportunities, reducing the level of crime and violence in the society. What is today's news for these people who voted for you?
Well, let me put it this way. It's the economy, the economy, the economy. And I said to one of the younger ones who described themselves as the next generation, and they describe us as the current generation, I said to them they were asking for a bit of advice as they were leaving to go on some formal visit. And they were saying, you know, we really need to design some programs which deal with the debt and with austerity, and so that, you know, this sends out a signal to the world that we're serious on these issues. And I said to him, young man, we didn't hire you for that. You know, this is not austerity gospel. This is for you, the next generation, to go out and beat the bushes and find some new money to come in the Bahamas and get things started. So my mind now is on Bahama is going to be up and running in 2014. It promises to produce 10,000 jobs. Do we have the training programs in place so that these young people who are on the streets today, who have no work, are being trained? When that project is finished, they can take the job so that we're not in the position where we have to be scouting around for work permits again. And I happen to see that where I'm sitting now as immigration minister. Here I am being asked to approve work permits for drywall construction. Good Lord, drywall construction. And I know, you know, scores of people sitting down in Fox Hill who say that they are good at drywall construction. When you talk to the employer, they say, well, the specifications are at such high quality, the job is so complicated, you need to have specialist skills, so on and so forth. And this has been the story of the Bahamas from, as far as I can tell, 1922, when the British colonial was built in 22 or thereabouts. And, you know, foreign artisans at each point in time. 1922, the British colonial. Windsor Field constructed in 1942 that led to the Burma Road riots. The 1980s, when we were expanding the airport, Carnival was building its project out at Cable Beach, and now the airport again, we're back to the same issue. So the question is, are we going to have the Bahamians who are trained up and running to do that? And that's our job, to fix that problem. And there'll be no excuses on it. We got to get it fixed so that people will have the jobs. And then, at the same time we're doing that, this idea is, what is the next big project? Because the thing that drives the economy in this country are big projects, construction, that gets skilled and semi-skilled artisans in work quickly, reliable income that's a fairly high level. And so we're up trying to think, what is that next big project? The airport project is going to be finished itself. I think it's got one more phase to go. So it's a project of that nature that we have to look at. What is the next big project? It may be that that project has to be in Grand Bahama. I've always thought that Grand Bahama should be the site of a World's Fair, that we ought to apply to the World Exposition Bureau in Paris for a World's Fair which would celebrate the folklore of this hemisphere in some way. And we work toward that project, which would be easily $500 million to develop, and would be providing the construction and infrastructure and so on and so forth. What you see happening now is the IAAF or AAAF has, is it AAF, has come in and they say they want to hold these international relays here in 2014 and 2015. What that's going to require is some infrastructural development, a big project to get up and running, because the country will be on showcase to the world and there'll be huge numbers of tourists coming in. So that's the kind of thing I think we have to start thinking about. And the younger ones, that's why we have their brains, to go think of those things. So from my view, philosophically, yeah, we got to control the debt. We have to be careful with spending, but no austerity gospel now.
Mr. Mitchell, the Bahamas has lost ground in its two major sectors of its economy. I read Minister Pinder's budget address, and he indicated we have lost ground in financial services. And our good friend Al Jarrett always bemoaned the fact that we were losing ground in tourism by the decline in stopovers. Those are our two major sectors of our economy, and we're losing ground.
Yeah, I mean, well, the objective evidence on that is clear, but that's why I say that's why we have these young brains now. You know, I'm with you. I'm not going to bemoan the fact. I mean, the fact of what happened over the last 5 years is unfortunate, it's regrettable and all the rest of it, but, you know, this is a brutal system we have. You know, and the system says when you're elected on that day, it's your responsibility. So the history is fine, the context is fine, but our job now is to fix these problems, and I'm up to the task. I'm consumed by it. I think my colleagues are consumed by it. We have some of the brightest young men and women around, and their brains are going to be taxed to find some fresh money in here, put some new ideas in place, move this system along so that this country is better off 5 years from now. You know, I remember when I used to analyze these things, the Depression, the Great Depression in the 1920s. And what I read then was that during that time in the United States, unemployment was 30%. Well, what that did mean was that 70% of the people were working. So the Bahamas, in this situation, if you want to argue by that way, yep, there's a recession and all the rest of it. But, you know, the money is still around there, and we need to get our share of that, and that's what our job is.
We're going to pick that point up, Minister, but let's take this break here. The Honorable Fred Mitchell, our guest, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Immigration. We'll come right back. We're back here on the platform this evening speaking with the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Immigration. Mr. Mitchell, you talked about money being around. Asia, there's some money there, but in Europe, they're hard-pressed. And in Spain right now, they're bailing out banks, and Italy and Portugal and Greece, they've all gone through their financial crises. And the international investor is in short supply. And one wonders where you're going to get the resources and where the government is going to find the foreign investors in particular, because I believe our economy has to have that foreign investment in it in order to get the 40-odd thousand jobs that we need. So where's the money coming from?
Well, as I say, the money hasn't disappeared. All this business is psychological. I mean, you know, they have lots of expressions for these things, but the one I like is quantitative easing, which essentially means that the big countries just print money when it's time to get money into the system and provide liquidity and credit and so on and so forth. I mean, the fact is, in the domestic banking sector, the sector is flush with cash, but they're not spending the cash, and you can't get loans from the banks. So there are ways to loosen those up. But what I say is this. There's a set of promotional trips, for example, being undertaken now by the Bahamas Financial Services Board in conjunction with the Ministry of Trade. And the talks are going to be taking place shortly for accession to WTO. So it's going to take the Minister of Trade and the Minister of Investment, who's gone off with Bahama to promote their investment here to London. And I'm told that the interest in the Bahamas is huge in London for people with private wealth who simply want a place to come that's hassle-free, that is not necessarily tax-free, but it's a pleasant place to live, the weather's great, so on and so forth, and you're still connected to the world and you can still do business. So my point about this, the 70% working and the 30% unemployed, and once you're in the 70%, you do reasonably well, is to just make sure that the Bahamas gets its share of whatever money is there. And that means the brain power. These next generation folk, that's their job. I told them, you know, don't come back unless you got $1 billion in your hand. You know, but if the serious point is, in the same way, a man like H.G. Christie in the 20s and 30s went out and single-handedly brought in people to the country, like E.P. Taylor and Wenegrin and all the rest of those men who spent money here, Huntington, Hartford, and brought fresh capital. That's the kind of thing that you need now. And I'm confident these younger people have the contacts and the experience to do that. Brazil, for example, is a market which I'm told today in some instances in the financial services sector, almost 40% of the business is actually booked out of Brazil. So one of the things we're thinking about as an adjunct to the financial services sector is to open an office in Brazil. And we have Bahamians who are living there now to be able to facilitate that. So, you know, you never stop looking. This is a business that you keep, you know, ranging up and down, and I think you'll find the opportunities. But the thing is to never say die, to be careful about your spending, but to be aggressive in your promotion overseas. Because at the end of the day, you can explain all you like about recession and all the rest of it, and I say this to my colleagues all the time. We can have a forensic enthusiasm for the past, but the fact is, you know, people need to eat today. Their kids need to go to school today. You know, jobs have to be found today.
And you have to be creative.
And that's what we're going to do.
But Mr. Mitchell, you know, it is obvious that the Bahamas cannot continue on this two-leg stool of an economy. You got to broaden the base. What is being done to broaden the base?
Well, there was a white paper which we did when we were in opposition, which informed the platform that the PLP now has on foreign affairs and foreign trade. It was called Vision 2020. And in it, it indicated that agriculture had to be a key to whatever we were going to do in the future. And not only for reasons of filling in the dealing with the reserves and balance of payment issues, but for food security. I mean, the story of 2000 and the 9/11 situation where you know, there was no food and, you know, the warehouses were drying up. We knew that we had to have food security. So that was a big issue at the summit, which just took place in Bolivia for the Organization of American States. So I think that as you plot the future, you have to add agriculture, you have to add fisheries, you have to have the maritime, the development of the maritime sector, in addition to what is taking place in tourism and in the financial services sector. The thing that about tourism, and this is what we said when we left office, those who were criticizing us for Bahama, was that where else could you, within the space of 3 years, create 10,000 jobs for people that did not require super skills, that could have, you could walk out of high school with a basic high school education into a well-paying job and get the skills you needed essentially within 6 months. Where else could you do that? It was only a tourism project or product that could do that. And that is the beauty of tourism as a service. And so I think the Pinling government discovered in 1973, when the oil crisis hit in that year, that 2 countries survived, or 3 countries survived in the Caribbean intact, their economies intact: Barbados, Bahamas, Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad and Tobago for obvious reasons, because they had the oil and the natural gas, but Bahamas and Barbados because their economies were tourism driven. And once people saw that in the Caribbean, you see this dramatic shift toward tourism as the major service and export of countries in the Caribbean.
Yeah, but you have tremendous competition now in the Caribbean for tourism. And then you have Atlantis, which is going through its own financial difficulties, and as we speak, they have drastically reduced room rates at Atlantis, and so there are a whole lot of Bahamians who are concerned about the coexistence of Atlantis and Bahama, and the extent to which our tourism industry will grow, and we will have the numbers to employ the people.
Look, we've got, there are 6 billion, 7 billion people out in the world, there are high net worth.
They have the money to attract
high net worth individuals. I'm saying, there are obvious, there are clouds on the horizon everywhere. But, my view is that we've got the brain power. We say we've got the brain power. I believe we have the brain power, and it's our job to go and fix that problem. And I'm going to say, like I said before the 7th of May election, people were calling me up saying, they're doing, the F&M is doing this and the F&M is doing that. And I said, look, I don't want to hear any bad news till the 8th of May. On the 8th of May, you can call me up and tell me all the bad news you like. So there's plenty of bad news out there, but there's also plenty of good news as well. And the job of our next generation, together with the current generation, is to be sure that we beat the bushes, get the business in here, both in the tourism sector, and get some fresh money in here for investment. And that's our job, and that's what we'll be doing. And we'll continue to do it and beat the bushes till that happens.
You talk about the next generation. The leading ministers in the Christie administration are people from his administration of 2002-2007. You're Foreign Affairs again, Bobby Wilshcombe is tourism, and Mr. Christie is finance again. Same people are there. The neophytes, people in the background.
No, they're not in the background at all, because Ryan Pinder is leading trade. Jerome Fitzgerald, who is in education, is part of that generation.
I mean, you're not producing money in education.
But you are, because the solution to all the economic problems in the end is actually what's being produced out of those schools. So that's why we have this part of the whole crime-fighting effort, the effort on the economy is this investment in education, trying to double the investment in education over the next 5 years. The key to lifting people out of poverty is education. So those are 2 of the leading lights. And then you've got a former chamber president who's in the office of Prime Minister, who's in charge of leading the charge on investments. And you've got Mike Halkitis, one of the smartest guys I know, who is good with figures, knows how to balance budgets, how to deal with money issues, and eventually I think is headed toward being the Minister of Finance. So, the future is being built, but it's being built together. But everyone knows what the job is, and the job is to get this fresh money in here and to get our economy organized and back on track.
Okay, we have to take another break, I assume. Let's take this break here on the program, and we'll come right back. The Honorable Fred Mitchell is our guest on the platform today, and we are going to talk about foreign affairs and immigration in a short while, but I think, Godfrey, you have some more questions on this.
Mr. Mitchell, you spoke about Brazil, of which we have an embassy here. The Chinese are have a big presence. What about the Indians?
India is a place where we do have to have further outreach. Before I left office in '07, we had started an outreach to the Indian government. I actually made 2 official visits to India, and we signed a cooperation agreement with them. Left to me, there'd be a non-resident High Commissioner for India to drive the policy of renewal and engagement with India. And of course, you know, it's a great source of investment. One of the things we wanted to do in the short term was to deal with the question of access of Indian tourists to the Bahamas, because there are complaints about the ability to get visas on a timely basis. And I've recommended to colleagues that perhaps we need to adopt what's happened in Bermuda. In Bermuda, if you're coming from India, you can access India so long as you have a Canadian, British, or American visa. And so that might be one mechanism for dealing.
India is one of the leading countries in information technology.
Right.
And sitting at the doorstep of America, I would have thought there would have been some initiative to get Indian companies to set up computer or information technology industries here. And also, India has a fantastic university system, getting some Bahamians training in India.
Well, the thing is, we started all of those things, but in the, I'm going to call it the interregnum between '07 and now, all of that's fallen apart.
Yeah.
I mean, the same thing with our initiatives with South Africa. So, you know, we're trying to revive all of those things. As I said, we had the cooperation agreement, the Joint Commission agreement with the Indian government. Several of our Bahamians had actually gone to India for training courses in IT. The Chamber of Commerce signed a cooperation agreement with the private sector there, so it's a question of the Chamber of Commerce here being assisted in trying to do that. And I think the next level would be if we got this non-resident ambassador who would actually, well, High Commissioner, who would be responsible for, you know, visiting there from time to time and taking up the initiatives.
Minister Mitchell, in your the last time you were in office, in your first 5 years, you're in your second 5 now as Minister of Foreign Affairs. I thought you sought to put in place a foreign service. And many people complain that we really do not have a foreign service in the Bahamas in the truest sense of that term. Mm-hmm. What is being done in this, your second shot in the position of a foreign minister, to develop a real foreign service?
By foreign service, I think most people mean that instead of what happens now, where everybody joins the public service and then are transferred to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs where they serve, that in fact you have a Foreign Service Commission, and that Foreign Service Commission is responsible for the hiring, promotion, transfers of people who work for the Foreign Service, and that there are a set of Foreign Service orders which come into place, which govern and are rules for the conduct of how the foreign affairs of the country are conducted through those individuals. Now, we started the process, or it was actually started before I got there in '02. It was carried along and left in '07. I'm told that the Foreign Service orders have in fact been written. So that's one of the things in the speech from the throne that we promised we'd do, is we bring those Foreign Service orders into effect. What I'm concerned about, of course, is the transfer issues, because what you want to be sure is that someone is a volunteer, because if you're an existing Foreign Service officer, you know, there are contractual issues as you join the Foreign Service. And so there has to be some transition provisions similar to what they did with the creation of the Public Hospitals Authority, where people have 2 years, for example, to migrate to decide whether or not they're going to stay with the public service, which they can if they wish, or come over to the Foreign Service. Effectively, the terms and conditions will be the same, except there are particular rules which would apply to those in the Foreign Service in terms of how long they serve overseas, for example, when did they come back home, and what levels they will reach in the Foreign Service. And ultimately, the top of the technical scale in the Foreign Service will be the Director General of Foreign Affairs.
Normally, in a new government, you would have changes in ambassadorial positions, positions of high commissioners in Commonwealth countries. It's been more than a month now, and I haven't heard of any appointments, say, for instance, to the United States of America, where you would need an ambassador.
Yes.
What can you tell the public?
Well, I announced during my statement to the House last week that all heads of mission have been notified that they're recalled to home. The contracts that you sign, I mean, you can come home immediately, but the contracts that you sign say that you to be given 3 months. So we're giving people 90 days to wind up their affairs, and so they should all be home within 90 days. With the exception of the two diplomats, the one in Miami and the one in New York, who are professional diplomats, even though Ms. Bethel is a political appointee. She was kept on by the last administration largely because of her technical expertise. And in the case of Ms. Rhoda Jackson in Miami, she too is a professional diplomat. And the platform of the Progressive Liberal Party says that it wants a mix of the professional diplomats with political appointees. So the professional diplomats will be dealt with at a later stage, but all the political appointees, pure political appointees, have been notified to return home. And within the week, the Prime Minister will settle with myself what recommendations he wishes to make to as nominees for the new jobs. Mm-hmm. And they should be in place within by the time the 90 days expires.
Okay, so in the case of the United States of America now, who is in charge of the embassy?
There's a charge in the deputy chief of mission there, and this would be the case. Well, everyone else still has I'm sorry. In the United States, C.A. Smith is still the ambassador and in place. As a matter of fact, he headed the mission to Bolivia because I was unable to go last week. So all of the ambassadors are in place, and they will be in place until they return home.
For 90 days, as you said?
Yeah, well, the 90 days, in fact, started a week or more ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Mitchell, when you were last in office, there was a great deal of controversy regarding CARICOM and the single market. Mm-hmm. I'm a Caribbean person, very familiar with the Caribbean, and I don't think that either government has done well in public education of the role of CARICOM and how the outside world sees this region as a bloc, as a political bloc. Mm-hmm. And I believe that on too many occasions, particularly in agriculture, we do not get the benefits of CARICOM membership or involvement because we seem to be taking the position that our association with CARICOM is superficial. Hmm. Is that going to change?
It is, but you know, it's a project which would advance making haste slowly. Because of the political sensitivities of it. You know, we ran into huge issues over this in the term 2002 to 2007. The fact is, with the signing of the EPA, all of the objections which people had to the CSME really should fall away because they've in fact been conceded by the signing of the Economic Partnership Agreement with the Europeans. And it says whatever you concede to the Europeans, you must also concede to those in your own trading bloc. The only thing we haven't done, of course, is we haven't formally signed on to the single market, and I don't expect that that's going to happen because that's not part of our formalized agenda. But there's no question that the world sees us as a bloc, and the practicalities of it are what they are.
To go even further, you know, as an ACP state, African, Caribbean, Pacific state, that is the way the Europeans view us, and there's certain grants and development aid that we can get that I don't think we're availing ourselves to.
Well, the Economic Partnership Agreement is the last, well, the European Union is the last of the multilateral organizations that provide any development assistance for the Bahamas because as far as most people are concerned, we're too wealthy to get any development assistance. The issue with the EU, of course, is the timeliness with which you apply. The procedures are arcane and difficult, and you almost have to have someone dedicated specifically to writing EU projects. The Minister of Trade will have that as part of his bailiwick, and I believe that he'll move aggressively toward protecting that. We have, in fact, been paying for an office in Geneva for some time, sharing it with the Commonwealth, and there is a line item in this year's budget for $1.2 million to operationalize the office in Geneva to deal with the World Trade Organization accession procedures and to get the office up and running. And it is my expectation that being in Geneva will then assist with the whole question of dealing with Brussels, because it's actually in Europe, and we'll be able to work closely with it, unlike being in London, which is, as far as the EU is concerned, somewhat off the beaten path.
Given the financial constraints of the Bahamas, Minister, how effective can the Ministry of Foreign Affairs be in the normal things that you do? The issuance of visas, the management of your offices or overseas. We hear a lot about the huge deficit that the government has, and I know this is budget time. So speak to us about the financial wherewithal and the capability of the Bahamas to really run a foreign service.
It's one of these agencies which you must run, because you must have it and you must run it. And the budget is in fact somewhat less than the allocation the year before. So we're making do with less and have more to do. But it's all budgeted out, and as the financial exigencies arise, we can only do what we can do. But it's important, first of all, to get the spending authority, which is what the appropriations bills are. It's just the spending authority. It doesn't mean you actually have the money, or that you're going to spend the money, or that you're going to borrow the money, but you have the authority to commit the funds and to do that. As you go along, you see what you can do. Which is why it's most important for those who are involved in foreign trade, the tourism minister, the investments minister, the minister of finance. They have to be key to getting this fresh money in here, because that's really what's going to drive this economy.
One important portfolio that you now have is immigration. Throughout the campaign, Bahamians were screaming about the problems that we have with illegal immigration in the Bahamas, and even the number of work permits that have been issued in that particular department, in the Department of Immigration. There are a whole lot of people who are calling for new policies in the Ministry of Immigration. Are we going to see any new policy from this government?
It's a careful balancing act. There will be new policies. Take some time to find my way through it. I'm just asking myself a whole set of questions now. On the illegal immigration side, I mean, it's clear what has to be done. We've got to, batten up the borders, and we have to make sure that people don't breach the borders. I've been saying that we need to have intelligence officers in Haiti to deal with the question of illegal migration from that country. We need to revive the Joint Commission Agreement with the Haitian government and see whether we can get it ratified on their side and then operationalize that agreement. The Defense Force has to be mobilized and properly resourced to do the work to stop the migrants from coming in illegally. But that one is not an easy one to solve, but it's clear and it's discernible what you have to do. The more complex issue is the legal immigration.
Yeah, but you have also the illegal problem of people who are now in the Bahamas illegally. And I'm told that there are thousands of them who are here illegally. Immigration ministers in the Bahamas, when they arrest illegal immigrants, they are thought to be good ministers. When you don't, they believe you're a bad minister. So what are you going to do?
I don't agree with you that people see it that way. Some people see it that way, and
Well, Bahamians want them gone.
well, some people, but what I'm saying is the population is split 50-50 on this question. I mean, it's a very delicate balancing act, because what I saw in my time as an activist, as soon as the minister started with the harsh enforcement procedures, the other half of the population rose up and said you were being too cruel to people. So there's a balancing act, but clearly you have to enforce the law, and clearly people have to be repatriated who are here unlawfully. And that is going to continue, and that will be done, and the law will be strictly enforced. That's me. And that's on the question of illegal migration and people who are here unlawfully. What I say is...
Before you move, there are some people who believe that for years the government has been too soft in this regard, and we have seen the proliferation of shanty towns, not only in New Providence, but in some family islands as well, because of the soft stance of the some ministers who've had the portfolio in the last administration for a long time. You didn't see the effort that many Bahamians thought ought to be put into the rounding up of illegal immigrants in place.
Enforcement is something that we obviously have to work on, and we have to work on assiduously. And as I say, and I can only say it over and over again, the law is going to be enforced, and it is going to be enforced strictly, and there'll be no backing off on that issue.
Okay.
What about?
But you're making the point.
But I was making the point that the concern I have, the major concern I have, is the question of legal migration to the Bahamas. And this is the question of those people in the middle class who have seen their jobs being taken away by a permissive work permit policy. And the fact that the last administration almost seemed to boast about the money that it made off giving work permits. Last year or this year, it said that something like $45 million will be contributed to the revenue from work permits. So if you look at it that way, you say to yourself, what is the disincentive to a government that's revenue starved for turning back work permits? If the answer is simply you can get another few $1 million by giving out work permits. I've asked a number of questions. BTC, for example, has some 40 or 44 work permit holders. Why would you need work permit holders in BTC? What do you need them for?
You have foreigners who own the place. That's an easy answer. They have 51% of the shares.
Well,
so.
you can supply the answers right now. I'm just asking myself the questions.
Okay.
I'm saying that the banking sector, we've seen that in the banking sector, why does any bank in the Bahamas that deals in the domestic sector, why can't it have a managing director who's Bahamian? And why do you need work permit holders in the domestic banking sector? So that's a question I ask myself again. I asked the question earlier, why do you need to be giving out work permits for drywall construction in the Bahamas when there are scores, hundreds, if not thousands of young men and women who are unemployed who can do drywall construction in the Bahamas? So I'm sitting there, and at the same time, when you're granting these work permits or refusing these work permits, you have the ordinary Bahamian, and these are Bahamians who live in Baintown and Grantstown and in Centerville and in Farm Road and in Fox Hill, who themselves want housekeepers and live-in maids and gardeners and handymen. And do you turn down their work permits at the same time that you're turning down work permits against the banks or BTC or whoever it is? So there you have it. I mean, and the immigration minister is supposed to resolve all those conflicts of legal migration.
Mr. Mitchell, what about the naturalization process? You've got thousands of people born here, be they Jamaican, be they Haitian, whatever, and are frustrated by the inability to get regularized. What is being done? It says go to cabinet?
Yes, the way that works is that there are certain people who are entitled under the Constitution to citizenship, and that's the largest group is the people who were born here after 1973, whose parents were not Bahamian, and that would largely be Haitian-driven. The second largest group is probably Jamaicans. But there are thousands of these, and the question is, how do you address this issue? Now, again, it's the same issue which you raised here. I mean, you have one half of the population who says, look, you know, these people, you know, they shouldn't be here, they shouldn't get citizenship, they should go home. And then the other half that makes the argument about being humane and that the Constitution says what it says. So you apply. And it goes through the process. You have to show that you have been here for a period of time, that you went to school, that you have the immunizations, that you are who you are, and then you're interviewed to be sure that you are a genuine individual who's connected to the country. And then that application is prepared and sent on to the cabinet. And in our time from 02 to 07, we may have done maybe 40 of these a week, so you probably got done in a year about 1,200 or so. And given that you have thousands coming on, it's an impossible job to catch up on. Yeah. But at the same time, it's an unpopular exercise because the traditional Bahamian thinks that their country is being swamped by foreigners.
Has the time arrived, Minister, for this particular job of awarding permanent residency or citizenship to be really placed in the hand of a commission rather than the cabinet ministers making that decision? Should that still be a cabinet decision in this day and time, given the number of people that you have to deal with, to regularize?
Well, I don't want to break any new policy ground here because the policy is what it is. But, you know, let's suffice it to say that we're always looking, or I am, in public policy terms, always looking for more efficient ways to deal with it. And I think a modern country has to continue with that exercise of being more efficient with the way it deals with these, and dispassionately with these matters.
Okay, all right. Let's take this break here. This is our final break on the program, and Godfrey Inius would have a question for you when we return. The final segment here on the platform, Godfrey.
Mr. Mitchell, I believe that a government puts its stamp on a country through its policies. And Brendan and I talk about this all the time. It appears as if some of these policies seem to be cast in stone just because one administration did it, the administration that follows automatically goes along with some of these that would be called bad policies. Why it seems as if there's this reluctance to take a different course?
Well, perhaps it has to do with the fact that, you know, governments have traditionally been run by lawyers, and lawyers are trained on precedent, so it's very difficult to escape that whole question of precedent. But I was just talking to to the Minister of State and Finance, because again, I'm always looking to see how more efficiently we can run the actual government. So I've come back after 5 years in office, and you know, when you're traveling overseas as a minister of the government, there's a certain allowance which you get for travel. Yeah. And do you know, to this day,
anything changed?
No, nothing's changed. You still have to run down to the bank and actually physically cash a check and carry a wad of cash in your hand.
No credit card, nothing.
It's just unbelievable. Yeah. I couldn't. I said, you know, the government is big enough to have its own debit card in this day and age, so that all one needs to do is issue whatever the allowance is on the debit card and give it to not a credit card, it's a debit card, so you can't spend more than what's on the card. I mean, simple enough. And I say to myself, oh, gee, if I see that, I mean, I wonder why this can't be seen by someone. And one of the criticisms which the IDB had of when they were giving us advice on public sector reform was that we had to look critically at the actual decision-making of the government. What made it to cabinet? What didn't make it to cabinet? Was that the most efficient way of dealing with something in this day and age? So,
Minister, elections should mean something.
Yes.
And the elections in the Bahamas should mean something for the electorate. The people voted for change. And the people want to see change. And there are a good number of people out there are wondering when significant changes will come. Something like you've just said, with debit cards. How we move public servants.
One of the most blatant ones is the Negro Grand Sign. It's still up.
Elections must mean something. And if they don't mean anything, we might as well just stay with the people who are there. When are we going to see significant changes? I know you've only been in office for 5-6 weeks now, but what are those significant changes that you believe ought to come soon to give the Bahamian electorate some hope that the new Christie administration is up and doing?
well, I think the next round of changes, of course, will be the changes in the public officials at the public official level. I can't speak for what the Prime Minister's views are on this matter, but I think that I think people will look at that as a signal that there are going to be some changes coming. I think you have to give him and I think the other political officials time to get this budget thing out of the way. I think 1st July, I think you have to apply a different standard, because then all the money's in place, everything's in place, and then the public officials have to be assigned to new tasks where that is necessary. And I think the fresh programs begin.
You know, I was looking at the charter of the PLP and looking at the number of things that were promised in the charter, and to see whether or not the government has the capacity, the financial wherewithal, and to effect what you have in that charter.
There was a line item of $15 million, which is meant to operationalize some of the most important aspects of that. And I think that all members of Parliament who are with the PLP will be seeking to access the funding for that. The urban renewal, of course, is up and going. The one that I'm most concerned about is the program to improve the housing stock, which will affect my constituents in particular. I mean, with the rains coming, it was just a terrible problem and no means to address it. And so, you know, 1st July, I think small contractors have to be out in the highways and byways, you know, getting these homes fixed and having the added benefit of small contractors putting people to work.
Are these grants or loans for these people?
No, it's not a loan. It's just something which is done by the Urban Renewal Office.
Okay, so
it's a grant, I suppose, is what you would say.
So, yeah. So your house is leaking in Fox Hill or any constituency, you can apply to some agency for some relief?
Yeah, they come and have a look, and there's also a means test. You know, it can't be for people who are working and who have the funding to do it themselves. It's not meant to be a joyride. It's meant to deal with people who actually have cases of need and to deal with it quickly.
You know, there's certain things the Progressive Liberal Party inherited. One of which is this road improvement plan, right? Is any statement going to come out regarding what is the way forward for the Progressive Liberal Party?
Well, we had a meeting with the parliamentary secretary in Eastwood, and it was very interesting listening to people about this road project. And one of the things which irritates them is the amount of concrete which is stuck in the middle of the road for no apparent reason. And I was heartened by the response of the parliamentary secretary, who said, you know, they're looking at all these things and this concrete is going to come up because it just seems quite silly what they're doing. So, you know, I know that the Deputy Prime Minister and the parliamentary secretary are looking at this, at the plans, you know, to try and get a sense of where we are, because I think they understand that at this point now, you can no longer blame the guys before, because you know it's now your road project in a way, and so people want you to, as you say, they voted for change and they want you to fix the problem. I think it will be fixed.
It will be fixed.
Oh, no question.
Tell them don't dig up no more roads until they fix the ones they have now.
That's the other annoyance that Peter was talking about. I mean, you know, good Lord, they said, you know, you dig up this road and then you don't fix that, you leave it all dug up. You know, it just gives the impression the contractor does not know what he's doing.
Yeah, at least fix the ones you have now.
That's right.
And then when you fix them, then you should dig up some more.
That's right, yeah.
Well, thank you so very much for being here today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Appreciate it. Thank you so very much.
Right.
Thank you, Godfrey. And the minister came at short notice, eh?
Yeah.
Thank you so very much for obliging us today. Thank you for watching and listening to our program. Good evening, everyone.